I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James Whitefield, Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick and Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode of the Patriots Daily Podcast, powered by our friends at PrizePicks and Game Time. And today, powered by a very special guest. It is Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, their lead NFL draft analyst. And let's face it, fellas, the Patriots have had a really a solid, I guess, showing draft-wise. Everyone seems pretty high on it, what's happened. So no better way to have Trevor on the show to kind of parse through what's good, what's bad, and what happened for the Patriots, not only this offseason, or not only through the draft, but the entire offseason. So, Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. We've gone away from cookie-cutter intros with our guests. So before we get into the football, we do want to ask you, are you watching any shows lately? And is there any that you can potentially put us on to try and convince us to watch something new?
Wow. Okay. So I'm behind on shows, and my wife will be the first one to tell you that, because she feels like we can never start a show because draft season was here and I didn't have any time during the evenings. We were big into Severance, and we finished Severance. Excellent. Anybody who hasn't watched Severance should absolutely watch Severance.
No Severance pod.
Yes. Yeah, we are.
We also just finished season 2 of Silo on Apple TV. Ooh. So if you guys haven't started that, it's cool. I won't give away too much because part of the plot is also the mystery, but essentially there are 10,000 people living in a silo that's underground, and you sort of are like going through the societies of like living in a 10,000 person silo that's underground. And then there's a lot of mysteries involved. So it's a great show. And then the other one that I will shout out is, my wife's way more into this than I am, but like we're going through some of the Black Mirror episodes on Netflix, and like those are wild. Those are wild episodes. I like, sometimes I get done with them and I'm like, what did I just watch? I feel like I just wasted an hour of my life. But then others are like, oh my gosh, it's some of the best television I've ever seen. So yeah, those 3 are probably the ones that I would recommend here.
Great choices.
Yeah, good stuff. Black Mirror is good. I watched it a couple like years ago. I haven't got into some of the new ones, so I got to get back into that for sure. But Taylor, I think we've talked about it a couple of times here now too as well, and I just haven't been quite on board lately. But I'll get back.
The season's like just as sick as the ones in year. It feels like it's better than the last season that came out, where it was very hit or miss. This one is, I feel like, much more consistent, like old school Black.
Interesting. All right, got to get back into it. But let's get into the football now. Patriots make a bunch of picks last week. We obviously also have a mailbag. If you guys haven't seen already, you guys watching live, throw in your questions in the chat and we'll get to some of those. We also have some preloaded ones from Taylor's Twitter. But let's just start with a couple draft questions for you. Kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what the Patriots did. And just before we get into like the nitty gritty of it, I'm just curious overall your thoughts on, I guess, the Patriots draft class, but also the entire offseason, really ever since, the change of the guards with Gerard Mayo and Mike Vrabel happened. What has been your sense of what's going on in New England?
Yeah, this is going to be an extremely easy show for me because I love everything that they've done. Sometimes sometimes I'll go on podcasts of, people who are like covering teams, and it's like, oh, what'd you think of the draft? And it was like, I kind of thought it sucked. And it's, so it's like, sometimes it's a rough dynamic, but this one's easy. I gave the Patriots draft an A+. It was one of the 2 A+ that I gave. It was them and the Carolina Panthers. So they were tied at the top. And what puts a draft over the top of the difference of an A and an A+ is I rope in the total offseason. Like, it's not just drafting well versus where I had players on my board or players that I like. It's also the fact that I think that you're doing a great job in recognizing what you need. I think it's a lot of scheme fit players. And then I think it's complementary of what you did in the offseason. So the Patriots, obviously, you guys and your listeners know, ton of money to spend in free agency, had a massive part of the salary cap that they needed to spend some money on and get some new talent in, heavily invest in the defense side of the football, which I think was a smart thing to do because most of the talent that was available that you wanted to acquire was on the defensive side of the ball in this current free agency class. And so they did a great job getting new players in there. Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, Harold Landry, like all sorts of players who I think are going to be big time impact players for them. And then they supplemented that with an extremely offensive heavy draft. I mean, you start with Will Campbell, but they also added Jared Wilson. They got more dynamic with Travion Henderson and Kyle Williams. And then like even the players that we'll get to that they drafted on day 3, I just feel like it was excellent. And when I looked at this Patriots team last year, this was the least talented roster in the NFL by far. They had one of the worst, if not the worst, offensive lines in the NFL, but they had Drake May, right? And like that was right. They sort of, I think the team and everybody was like trying to sell you like that's all that really mattered. But clearly what Gerard Mayo was doing and how he was handling things with the team and growing things moving forward, they weren't happy with that. I think it also helps when you have not only a franchise legend, but somebody who's been an excellent head coach in this league and Mike Vrabel, who's available to get to bring back. But just the addition of Vrabel, the vision that they had throughout the offseason, how they attack free agency, how they attack the draft is excellent. And they all of a sudden, the Patriots are like not just competent, but I think this team probably finishes second in the division this year, right? I think that Buffalo wins the division, but that's how highly I think of their offseason and what I think of Mike Vrabel is. I think that it is that big of a turnaround for them and what they've done.
We're kind of like a whip dog at this point on this show where we spent the past couple of years trying to be like, well, if this happens and that happens, and I can see them actually being competitive. I think you remember last year during the draft podcast, it was pretty similar. I'm like, yeah, if Caden and like Javon go off, then maybe this turns into something. But this feels like the kind of free agency and draft class where there's not a ton of projections, right? Because you got the draft picks who have had histories of success for the most part, or at the very least, they have skill sets that feel like they could easily translate. But I am curious, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the draft in the offseason, were there any moves that you thought they maybe could have made or been more aggressive? Because I know on this pod, we talked about the DK Metcalf possibility. I wasn't really for it. I would have understood, but given where the room was at the time, I didn't love him. But were there any moves you feel like they maybe could have made to further supplement all their improvements? Or do you think they pretty much made the right steps where they had?
Not really. I mean, I think that's a good question because like, you bring in wide receiver and like, how do they feel wide receiver? Obviously they draft Kyle Williams and we'll talk about that a little bit. They bring in Stefon Diggs. They bring in Matt Collins. They have Pop Douglas already. You obviously have Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, who you're hoping to get like literally anything from at this point. But I kind of tell people this all the time. Not that I say this to devalue the wide receiver position, but you have the ability to acquire good wide receiver talent multiple times every single year. Like whether it's during training camp, at the trade deadline, in free agency, or drafting them, good wide receivers become available all the time. Again, like DK Metcalf is an example. DK Metcalf was like on the Seahawks and we were like, no, I mean, like, sure, he's going to want a big deal coming up or whatever, but like he's a Seattle Seahawk. And all of a sudden it's like, nope, he's gone, and it's just like, it happens so quick with wide receivers. So if there are people out there that get worried about like a team not having the right wide receivers, yeah, okay, short term that might be an issue, but as long as the team recognizes that, I'm not somebody who gets overly worried about not having wide receivers exactly right now. And I mean, I guess they could have hit offensive line harder, but to be honest with you, like a starting five of Will Campbell, Cole Strange, Garrett Bradbury for now, I think that Jared Wilson's going to be the starting center at some point. Mike Onwenu gets to play guard. Morgan Moses gets to play right tackle. I mean, that's so night and day better than what it was last year. The ceiling, the floor, both of those things are higher. And then they did a ton on the defensive side of the football. So I can't really say that I realistically, I would have rather seen them go one way or the other. I think it's been an excellent offseason for them. I really do.
So we keep pushing off the nuts and bolts of the draft class, but everything you've said has kind of moved the conversation forward. So before we get into the draft class, we've talked about those wide receivers, right? They didn't go necessarily after DK Metcalf. They were semi-involved, it sounds, in trading for Cooper Kupp. That didn't happen. What they did do, however, is sign Stefon Diggs. Where are you on the Stefon Diggs, train here in New England? Do you think that's going to amount to anything? I know it's kind of hard to project with the injury, but was that sort of the right veteran wide receiver move, you think, for them? Do you think he can actually come in and, whether he's healthy early or not, like kind of make an impact?
I think that it was fine. I still think that when you look at this Patriots team, they still don't have a wide receiver one on the roster. Like Stefon Diggs has been a wide receiver one at other points in his career, but he's coming off injury. He's getting older. Matt Collins is a good vertical receiver. Clearly, from what we've seen from him in Buffalo, he's a clutch receiver, which is really like a good thing to have. Baker and Polk that you're hoping can elevate themselves into like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 caliber players. I think that Kyle Williams is one of those that is absolutely capable and talented enough to be your wide receiver 2 moving forward. I think Pop Douglas, the same thing, like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, but I don't see a wide receiver 1 on this team. So again, like thinking of, were they in the DK Metcalf sweepstakes? Were they in the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes? Like these kinds of things to go after what could have been a solidified wide receiver 1. Maybe that's something that's a little bit different. I think it's totally fine that they brought in Stefon Diggs, and I think that he will be fine for them. But I don't think that you're acquiring like Minnesota Vikings Stefon Diggs, right? I mean, like I don't think that he is that type of a player for you anymore. But I think having a proven receiver is good, especially for as young as the rest of the wide receiver group is. And then next year you kind of you figure it out, and maybe they're making a big splash somewhere else. It feels like Brandon Ayuk is still disgruntled, so like maybe he's still in the conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe bring him in just a year later than you thought maybe you would. But that's sort of how I'd view that wide receiver group right now.
And I do want us to like move on and get to another topic, but I am curious because you touched on it, like wide receivers become available. Patriots don't have a wide receiver 1. Ayuk is a bit of an unknown because of the injury and all that, but are there any wide receiver 1 types that you see potentially becoming available at some point this season, whether it's camp? Obviously, maybe, if you see a team, the season doesn't go the way they want, and then they're like, hey, fire sale, we just got to start getting rid of people and getting some capital.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head who would it be, because like the conversation over the last 6 months was like DK, he got dealt. T. Higgins got his deal, so he's not going anywhere. Ayuk is sort of the tricky one. Tyreek obviously is like, okay, like that's up in the air. Like he's talked about wanting to be out of Miami, but he's also talked about like being done with football. So I don't know how much longer he is going to be there. I think one to monitor is like Olave with the Saints. Like depending on how the Saints season goes, he's somebody who's dealt with concussion injuries. So it's not ideal trading for a guy who's dealt with concussion injuries, but like when Olave's out there, he's a stud. So does New Orleans get to the point where it's New Orleans, so probably no, but they finally like bite the bullet and say like, okay, like let's really lean into the rebuild. And if that's the case, like, do we trust Olave to be healthy long-term? That's somebody that I think about, but those are a handful that come to my mind immediately of guys that might be available. But wide receivers, the craziest market. Like, honestly, Philly fans will yell at me for this, but like AJ Brown could potentially want to, I think that
reunite, baby, Mike Vrabel.
Right, exactly. And we know how much Mike Vrabel loves AJ Brown, and AJ Brown has won a title in Philly, and it's part of the wide receiver position. Like they're not here for a long time. It's just so very rare that you get a wide receiver who's with you for a long time. And so the fact that AJ Brown got his Super Bowl ring, won it in Philly, I think there's a world where maybe he feels like next offseason he goes, you know what? I'd like to sign another massive deal. I don't know what his contract is off the top of my head, but it might be a situation where Vrabel goes, yep, make it happen. Let's get that guy back. So like those are I think the names that come to my mind.
Speaking my language, Trey. Yeah. I love it.
All right, let's do some draft stuff because you are a draft analyst for a reason. You've mentioned Will Campbell on the offensive line. Obviously, Kyle Williams has come into play in the conversation thus far. Talked about Jared Wilson as well. Overall, who was your favorite pick the Patriots made over the last or over those 3 days last weekend?
Great question. There's a lot to choose from. Braden Swinson, I think, has to be my answer just because he's picked 99 spots after where I had him ranked on my big board. I had him as a top 50 player. I had him ranked 47th. And he gets picked 146. And I understand that this is a little bit later of a breakout player. He's not great in run defense right now, but I mean, even as just a designated pass rusher, he had an incredibly high pass rush win percentage. I think it was like 22.1% pass rush win percentage. He had an elite pass rush grade against offensive tackles on true pass sets. So true pass sets means like we're taking out like RPOs, we're taking out quick game stuff. It's okay. Is the quarterback holding on to the ball for at least 2.5 seconds? Is the offensive tackle actually asked to do a real pass block against you? And what's your pass rush grade against offensive tackles in those situations? And it was elite from Braden Swinson this past year. So I thought at very worst, he should have been a 3rd round pick. He gets drafted in the 5th round. I think that's just excellent value from them. So I really, really like that selection. That one makes a ton of sense for me. I like the Campbell selection. The Campbell selection to me makes sense as well. I think he's a left tackle. I think you should get a totally fair shot to start at left tackle. And it feels like the Patriots agree, right? Because you don't draft him at 4 and think that he's a guard. Now, they may think at worst he's an all-pro caliber guard, but I don't think you draft him at 4 if you don't think that he could play tackle. So I'm excited that he's going to get that opportunity. But of all of their picks, and I really like this draft class, Braden Swinson's probably the one that stands out to me as the one with the best value that they got in the 5th round.
If anyone hasn't seen your PFF grades for the Patriots, first of all, do that right after this show. It was fantastic. On top of that, though, I really love that you called out Swinson there as well, because when watching him, like the Patriots edge rush, it's like looking for water in the desert. Like you don't need the well-rounded guy necessarily right now. Like you need some juice. And he has the elements to his game that you don't typically see from a lot of college edge rushers, where he converts the speed to power, right? And he really puts guys on skates. But even more than that, when he uses his hands and wants to win with finesse, he makes contact, and he's actually beating guys' hands, making, all the points that you need to actually be effective. So I don't know if or when he'll ever be an every down type player, like you said, but like worst case scenario, I think it's an upgrade over an Uche, where unless Uche was like flying upfield, you really couldn't count on him at all in run defense. Where at least Swinson, like he'll put his hands in a guy's chest and thump him back enough that he's competitive and he's good backside or unblocked. So I love that one, man. I understand, especially with Will Campbell on the roster and someone who's been his teammate, where Will was drafted and they were like, all right, if we bring the guy in, what do you think? And I think Elliot Wolf said he fell in love with him because he saw him at a practice at LSU. So I'm just glad you called that one out. I feel like it's not getting the hype it deserves, but I really like what Swinson can bring to this team.
Yeah, I do too. And again, I thought worst case scenario, he's getting drafted in the 3rd round as a designated pass rusher. I mean, you get him in the 5th round, and I think that even on the lower end of the spectrum, what Swinson is going to bring you is going to be well worth that. So I'm with you 100%. What I loved about him is hand usage stuff. I mean, he felt like he was always working to stay clean. He anticipated things really well this past season. Again, I know he was a late breakout type of a guy, but I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of his. Obviously, I had him in the top 50 on my rankings for a reason. So I think he's a total steal here.
Love it. All right. We'll get back into the draft as well as get to your Patriots questions in just a second. But first, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks, and congrats to Trevor in the chat from Boss GM. Word from Prize Picks. We'll be right back. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And it's not just the regular season, it's the postseason as well. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series. That's right. Starting with the play-in round, every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Takes to Tickets sweepstakes, which can get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. You think Anthony Edwards will get more than 24 points? You think Jason Tatum will have more than 35? Cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. And all you got to do is download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. That is Prize Picks. You guys know them. Head over there. Use that code CLNS for $50 instantly after you play $5. Celtics versus New York Knicks tonight. If you want to get in on some action while watching that game, just head over to Prize Picks and use that code. Helps out the show as well. All right, let's get into some mailbag stuff here. We'll start with an NFL draft question. This one comes from @Mondre the G. Mondre is wondering Trevor's favorite late round steals in the draft on day 3, assuming this is not just Patriots related, but draft in general. Who came off the board later that you could have thought went earlier? I guess we already did Braden Swinson, so we can skip
Swinson's one of them. I'm scrolling through like 4th, 5th, 6th round. CJ West, I think getting him in the 4th round was clutch from the San Francisco 49ers, whose draft was all over the place, in my opinion. But like, I actually really like this pick. I thought West could have been a 3rd rounder. I know he's just a nose tackle type, but he's somebody who I really like. I like Baron Sorrell in the 4th round as well. Kyle Kennard from the Chargers. Them getting these guys in the 4th round, I think was great. Titans getting Alec Iomaner, somebody who was my wide receiver 5, 6, can't remember. I had him top 50. Big fan of Alec Maynard from Stanford. He goes to the Tennessee Titans at 136. That was another massive steal in this draft, in my opinion. I think he could be wide receiver 2 in Tennessee. I really do. I think that he was a massive steal there. Jaden Blue going to the Dallas Cowboys in the 5th round, I think is the perfect wide receiver for sort of like what they need there. Cam Williams, the offensive tackle from Texas in the 6th round, going to the Philadelphia Eagles specifically, getting to work with Jeff Stoutland and a phenomenal offensive line there in Philadelphia. I think he'd get the most out of a talented player. Los Angeles Rams getting Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker from Ole Miss in the 5th round, I thought was a big time steal. I thought Chris Paul Jr. again, like should have been a 3rd round pick. And I understand he's a little bit small for the position. He was kind of a 1-year wonder this past year, but man, his game this past year was awesome. He anticipated things so well. He approached the position in such a high football IQ type of way. So I thought he was a major steal in my opinion, getting him there in the 5th round. So that's a team that also knows how to make the most out of linebackers. Omar Speights was an undrafted free agent for them last year and ended up being a starter. Aeneas Peebles from the Baltimore Ravens, getting him in the 6th round was awesome. RJ Mickens from the Chargers in the 6th round. I think I think RJ Mickens is legit going to be a starter for the Chargers at some point. He is just such a solid football player. He's got the long arms to him, which helps him be a great wrap-up tackler, great for passes defended as well, forced incompletions, all that good stuff. I thought that's a really high-value pick. Damian Martinez to the Seattle Seahawks at 223. I have no idea how Damian Martinez is still available in the 7th round at 223. And yeah, so there you go. That's a handful that are just kind of like scrolling here and seeing those guys on day 3. Those are a handful that stick out to me.
AFC West had an infuriatingly good draft. I hate it.
They really did. I think the Broncos, I gave the Broncos a B+. I gave the Chiefs an A. I gave the Raiders an A. And I gave the Chargers a B+, I think. Like all of them just had a really, really good draft. Yeah.
Before we get into another one, you mentioned the grades again, and you said you had the Patriots A+, you had Carolina A+.
Yeah.
Curious about your thoughts on Ted McMillan, because I guess where you had him ranked, I know he obviously went 8 to Carolina. He was sort of thrown around here and with the Patriots as a potential fit with their need at wide receiver. I guess I hate to do hypotheticals, but was he worth it? Would he have been worth it at pick number 4 over Will Campbell? What are your thoughts on Tet in general as a player?
I had Tet ranked ahead of Will Campbell, but not by much. I mean, he was sort of in that bucket of like, you know, the first tier of players is Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, right? I mean, like those are in tier 1. That's in like the first bucket for this draft class on my big board. But then after that, it was like Tet, Will Campbell, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty. Like it's like all of those guys are in the same bucket. So if you would argue one or the other, I'd have been like, okay, like I can understand where you're coming from. I'm a huge Ted McMillan fan. I really am. I personally thought we were just nitpicking him, you know, and it's like there's way too much Drake London, Mike Evans type of player in there. Now, like those guys obviously went to great situations and stats and longevity often need to be credited to the organization as much as it is the player talent. So I always try to remind folks of that. But like Ted's so good at the catch point. He needs help with his releases. He needs more of a diverse release package just because in the Pac-12, I mean, there's not a lot of corners that were in his conference that really like knew how to press him. And so they just didn't really press him at all. And so he's going to
like it.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to need to learn to get off the line of scrimmage a little bit better. He's going to have to diversify his route diversity, or sorry, his release diversity, excuse me. But the contested catch stuff, how he plays in the red zone, the yards after catch quickness that he has, I think he's awesome. And so I loved him for Carolina. Actually, funny enough, I did some video content work like for the Panthers, like Panthers.com. And they had me in and they had me like going through a mock draft, and they like did a mock draft. And then it was like a consensus mock draft of like where all these players have gone, like, oh, okay. Like in most of the mock drafts, you know, like Cam Moore goes 1 and Mason Graham goes 2, whatever it was. And when we got to the board at number 8, they wanted me to make a pick. And that was at the time when all we heard Carolina was going to do was defense.
Yeah.
And so I felt weird about not saying defense there, but I started it and I was like, I'd take Ted. I'd take Ted McMillan here. And I was like, I understand that your listeners and everybody's probably going to be like, they're not going to take offense. They're not going to take offense. Yeah. Talk about the defense. And so I talked about, like Shamar Stewart and Donovan Izaraku and Jalen Walker and all those guys. But I said, right off the bat, I was like, just to be very clear, I would take Tetairoa McMillan. And then they end up taking Tetairoa McMillan, which was kind of funny. But I absolutely would have considered him at number 4. I think that highly of him. And I think that he would have been, going back to that conversation of them not having a wide receiver 1 on the roster, I think he would have been the wide receiver 1 on this team.
So basically, if we didn't already, we now have confirmation that the Panthers are following your Twitter and all your content. They're making sure they're locked in.
I guess so, but I'm not going to tell. I will take all of the credit when it works out.
Oh yeah,
and I will take none of the blame if anything that they do on my behalf does not work out. So that's how it's going to go.
Draft season.
That's
draft
the name
season.
of the
Draft season, yes.
Yeah. All right, staying on wide receiver 1s. A little bit of a joke question here, but as Tampa Bay Trey, can you wrap up Chris Godwin in a rug and ship him up north to the Patriots, who were also in the mix for his services this offseason? Funky Bravado says he'll start a pool for shipping and handling. But on a serious note, wanted to turn the joke about Godwin into a conversation about Godwin because the Bucs also drafted Emeka Egbuka first round. Your thoughts on Godwin this year in general, with coming off the injury and the kind of bidding war-ish that they got in with the Patriots? Where are you on Chris Godwin? And if he did come to New England or even staying in Tampa, what's your outlook like for him this year?
Yeah, absolutely not. Stay away from Chris Godwin. He will never be anything but a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. No, he's look.
Seems it.
Godwin is an incredible football player, also a wonderful human being. And I think that's why, Tampa very in on who he is and his work ethic to come back from this injury. And I don't know. I don't think it's fair to say back and better than ever because it was such a devastating injury. But if anybody's going to work their butt off to be as best as they possibly can be, the Bucs knew that it was Chris Godwin. The rumor was he left a couple $1 million a year on the table to take Tampa's deal over New England's. And so, it does make it very interesting because, obviously being a Tampa Bay guy myself, a lot of people were asking me about what I thought of the Bucs draft. And it's I like it. It was not what I thought they were going to do. Right. I mean, Mike Evans looked younger this year than he has in the last 2 to 3 years. And so that tells me he's got 2 more years left. I think he's got 2 more years left in the tank. He's an unrestricted free agent this coming off season. But to me, Mike Evans is basically in the LeBron situation where he's just signing a series of 1-year deals until he's going to retire. If he was going to leave Tampa, I think it would have been this past deal that he did previously. And now that he didn't leave, I think he is just going to sign a series of 1-year deals in Tampa until he retires. And I don't think it's this offseason. Godwin's interesting because I don't think he starts the year on the team. They say that he might be ready for week 1. I'd be shocked if he's ready for week 1. So most likely they're probably not getting him back until week 4, week 5, week 6. They're going to go through this entire season to sort of figure out where Godwin is, what Mike Evans is thinking long-term, but very clearly they drafted Emeka Egbuka to get ahead of all this because this happened with the Bucs on their offensive line 3 years ago. Ali Marpet retired out of nowhere way earlier than they thought that he was going to. And then Ryan Jensen tore his knee so bad that he had to medically retire. And all of a sudden, the offensive line that won them a Super Bowl, those 2 guys were gone and Alex Kappa had left in free agency. And they were sitting here how did this happen? Everything was fine 2 minutes ago. And now it is all, it's bad. So I think they looked at their wide receiver situation. And the reason why they drafted Emeka Egbuka is because they said they probably are thinking worst case scenario, if Chris doesn't come back to form the way that they want him to. And if Mike Evans decides, you know what? I got the 1,000-yard record. I'm good to go. I'm calling it a career. They're not losing both of those players in one offseason and having nothing left for them to lean on. So that's sort of just giving you guys the background of where the Bucs are in their situation. I think it's very, very unlikely that they trade Chris Godwin. I think that it is much more likely that they are in it for he signed a 3-year deal. It's essentially a 2-year deal. I think they are in on Chris for 2 years. And then whatever happens after that, if he doesn't get to where they want him to go, they might cut him or trade him. But I think that he's on the Bucs for another 2 years.
Serious question. Very
ahead,
stern. Do the Buccaneers have like the most likable receiving core in the NFL?
I think so.
I was thinking about it. I'm like, I love all of these people. As
Yep.
you say, everyone, I'm like, man, I hope the best case scenario happens for all of those guys. Like,
Yeah.
they
They're
all
Jason Light, man, it's funny. Like, I started my career as a beat reporter covering the Buccaneers, and my first year there was 2017. Jason's first year there was 2014. So he went through some growing pains as a general manager through his first like 4 years. But since then, he's really gotten into a groove of like what works and what to prioritize and everything. And like the type, not just the types of like players, because I think Jason like came up through the scouting staff there, but also just like people. Like they just have a roster full of like dudes that like want to play in Tampa. Like they really do. And I think that shows with a lot of the free agents that they were able to bring in, like even the Brady one, like the Brady domino, like, yeah, of course people look at it and go, oh, of course Tampa got good because they got Tom Brady. Well, Tom Brady could have played so many different places in the NFL and he chose Tampa. And the reason why is because of like the locker room that they brought in and everything and all of that. So it's like when he left, Brady chose to go down to Tampa Bay. And I think that's just a nod to the types of people and the players that they have in the building to like you said, like it's just a lot of guys that you like to root for. No,
that's a good point too with the Light connection too, because he was in New England for a while. He knew Tom, and then they made that, it was essentially let's build this roster up together, and it got them to where they are. And then, I mean, I'm a Baker Mayfield truther, and I have been since he was at Texas Tech. So I'm obsessed with that team too. But back to the Patriots here. Taylor, I'll start with you on this one because I know you have a Craig Woodson film breakdown either out or coming out soon. So Patriots draft the safety out of Cal in the 4th round. How could he be used in this Vrabel defense? I'll ask you that, and then we'll kick it to Trevor as well to kind of get his thoughts on the selection in general.
Well, when we spoke to him, I remember asking how we thought he fit in this defense where Vrabel historically runs a lot of quarters, but also he told us, I got guns, so I want to play as much man coverage as possible. And he was saying that in his first couple of seasons as a starter, he was actually the field or strong safety and then switched to boundary or free safety last year. That's where all the communication came in. You're making all these pre-snap adjustments. And Cal ran like an NFL type secondary where they're disguising all the time. They're running everything. So he's played a lot of different roles. And I think he really can do anything they need in that secondary pretty much. Like once I really got into the tape, you just don't see many glaring mistakes from him. First of all, like I don't think he gave up a touchdown last year. And you also see the physicality. He's not like the biggest guy. He's got small hands, shorter arms. I think that shows up like Syracuse. They picked on him, and that's why I don't love him like as a tight end guy. If Marcus Epps makes this team, I think maybe you see Woodson as more of a strong safety nickel corner type, or big nickel corner type. But if we end up with Jabril Peppers and kind of he's on the back end, and we have the Peppers-Duggar kind of combination we've been having, then maybe you see more free safety and Peppers more in the slot, I think. But I really think he can do it all in long term. He's probably that Devin McCourty, mostly plays center field. He'll be a robber in some of his passing situations. And then he'll play against some tight ends if there's a team with 2 really good ones, but mostly I think he's going to be a center fielder.
Yeah, I would agree. I like him the most in space. And when you look at some of his PFF numbers, I think they back that up. 21.1 forced incompletion rate while playing on the back end that showcases, the first step explosiveness, how he can break on the ball, how he anticipates things. He's getting there at the catch point. He's disrupting the catches. And then missed tackle rate of only 8.6%. That was a really high percentile. I mean, this guy can come down from depth and he can tackle you. So he was a fun eval for me because I got to him pretty late. Like safeties just it's at the end. Like I'm getting to quarterbacks first, and then like safeties are just naturally at the end. So it took me a while to get to safeties anyways. But when I initially watched Craig Woodson, I was like, oh, like free safety, like great free safety, coverage defender. Like I love what I see in range. And then like I watched a couple more games from him and I was like, oh, like downhill safety. No. Like I like a lot of what he's doing, like as a downhill safety. So you're right. He's a little bit smaller of a dude. And I think that's why he was drafted a little bit later. But I mean, where did I have him? Hold on. I have this here.
These Pats fans thought he was a reach for context at the time. Like I wasn't super familiar with him. I was more with pass rushers. So when they took him, I didn't have a lot to say, and it kind of did feel maybe reachy. But then everybody in the media was like, "Oh, we love this guy. This is an awesome pick."
Yeah, so 4th round, I thought he would be somewhere between like a 4th and 5th round pick. Now he's early 4th round, so he's drafted like significantly higher than where I had him ranked. I had him 167th, which is like somewhere, like 5th round ish is where I felt like he had a good round value there just because of the size limitations. But the versatility that he gives you, I feel like early in the 4th round, it sort of just becomes where you want to deploy this player and how much faith you have in him type of a thing. So he could do a lot for you. And so I'm interested to see where they're going to end up deploying Craig Woodson.
Do you see him as a day one starter type? Because that's kind of why I liked it the more it grew on me. Because I'm like, if you get a starter in the 4th round, I don't care that he's 24, been in college 6 years. That's pretty good value.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like if he's a starter, then that's an absolute steal for you. I feel like they already have would you say like is Epps like a sort of like a fringe roster guy, or is he like on the team and he's fine? Like what's the story with the rest of their safety group?
So safety is one of the more interesting positions because there's like a lot of guys with different like lineage on the team. So Vrabel's been getting rid of captains and like all the leaders from the previous regimes. He's signing guys where he knows the way they move. The way I've kind of seen it is like, yes, follow this guy's lead. Like Harold Landry, one of the highest paid guys they signed. All the edge guys, the rookies on defensive line, follow Harold Landry. Marcus Epps, captain for Josh McDaniels. I figure he was like Vrabel's guy in the safety room where he knows where he's going to get out of him. Like McDaniels probably vouches for him. So he's coming off an injury. I think he's probably in the best spot because of that. Peppers got arrested last year. He was acquitted of one charge, but still was found guilty of another. And he had his captaincy taken away. It feels like he's not safe, because you get 2 guys who played free safety. Peppers was mostly a free safety for you. He also had an ACL injury or a knee injury, that he dealt with late in the year. So there's a ton of red flags going off for Peppers. And then Duggar dealt with injury, got injured like week 4, got dealt with it, and it got worse. So like the safety room is kind of a mess when you really look at it. And
That's the right way to put it, a mess.
Marcy Mapu hasn't worked out. Del Pettis is really just a man coverage guy and a special teamer. So that's why I'm saying like Craig Woodson, he doesn't have the red flags. So it's kind of hard to see a world where he doesn't start unless the veterans who've been there just have great summers and play themselves on the roster.
That would also make sense of why they draft him at 106, kind of at the peak of where his range would have been if you believed that he could be a starter for you. So, yeah.
I just gave away my video kind of, but there's film in that one. There's film.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think, it is sort of an up in the air room with kind of where everyone is. I like Taylor, the lineage term you used there, but it's true, like where they came in, what their standing is on the team. And, when you ask the question, is Epps a fringe roster guy? My immediate thought was, yeah, he is. Cause I don't know if, he has enough standing to make the team, but nobody really does. Cause it is just kind of a mess right now.
A lot of banged up older guys.
Yeah, exactly. On that, and one question here, then we'll get to an ad break and then we'll finish it up shortly. But just on position groups, with the Patriots. I know we just talked about safety, but Trevor, I know you said that you've loved what the Patriots did across the board, really fixing the roster as well as through the draft. What position group is still a red flag for you with the Patriots? What do you think is the weakest one they're sitting on right now?
Probably I would say like long-term off-ball linebacker, solidifying the offensive line entirely. They have a lot of darts that they've obviously like thrown to the dartboard. They have a lot of names there, but like solidifying the offensive line and then just, like figuring out the long-term health of the wide receiver room. Like, I think again, like they brought a lot of names in, they have a lot of guys from last year's draft. And so like, there's a lot of like, I even see people in the chat, like throwing out names for wide receivers and everything. There's a lot of names in the wide receiver room, but like, okay, we got to sort that out. Like who's here for the long term, who are we actually leaning on, who's getting targets on this team. And so I think for wide receiver and offensive line, it's less of like red flags. And I would say like, it's kind of just your job over the next calendar year to sort that out. And when I say calendar year, I'm including like next year's draft as well. Like I'm hoping a year from now, the Patriots have some of the investments that they've already made that are on the team, like their foundational pieces. And then they're complementing that with guys that maybe didn't work out. And those units look a lot stronger a year from now. And then maybe off-ball linebacker, just because it's sort of like what you guys were talking about before, it feels like it's a decent amount of guys that were like old regime players. And I'm curious if they're going to stick around. So like off-ball linebacker, offensive line, and then wide receiver.
It's actually interesting there because it's linebacker. So Spillane is like if Vrabel and a McDaniels guy, funny enough. Ellis is a guy they fought to bring back. He got a waiver from the Raiders and they really wanted him to return. So he's actually been converted to a Vrabel guy.
Okay.
Then you got Jack Gibbons, Vrabel guy.
Yep.
Monty Rice, interestingly, also a Vrabel guy.
Vrabel guy.
The only one who isn't at all is Jelani Tavai. I'm curious also, this is kind of getting in the weeds. What do you think of Jelani Tavai's situation as someone who sees this from the outside? Because he said something kind of silly at the end of the year, drew ire from fans. He's also bigger, doesn't fit the mold of a Vrabel linebacker. But I think the best version of this defensive front is an attacking odd front, not the even fronts that Vrabel typically runs. If you do that, then Jelani is valuable because he can play on the line and off. If you stick with 4-man fronts and he's really only playing off ball, I don't see how he makes the roster. So what do you think is the best version of this defense? Because I think that kind of is where ultimately his job security lies.
I mean, he can make the roster. He's just a Sam, right? At that point, like he's a Sam linebacker, which you don't play base a ton anyways. And maybe you would keep him just because it's like, okay, when we do need to play base and we need 3 linebackers out there, we feel good about him being able to play Sam for us. And maybe that holds enough value to where like you would keep that spot anyways. And like in a pinch, if one of the linebackers go down, depends on if you feel like he could be a backup Mike as well, because that's how I would look at it. Cause I think that's also how I would assess it. If you're going with more of an odd front defense and you give yourself a little bit more flexibility of what that term linebacker is for you off and on ball, then that leans more into what Tavai does. But if it is more of an even front defense, it makes it more difficult unless you just really want to carry a Sam linebacker. And some teams will want to, some teams won't. Some teams will basically say, hey, we know that we're going to main nickel a lot this season. And if there's ever a situation, short yardage, red zone, within the 10, within the 5 goal line, where we want to be heavy and we want to just have the 3 linebackers as a base, and we want to play more closer to traditional base defense, we would just be comfortable playing our backup Mike as our Sam. Like some teams do that, right? They don't really carry a Sam linebacker. They just let their backup middle linebacker be that third on the ball type of linebacker. And you basically just tell them like, hey, hold the line of scrimmage, get after the tight end, get after the pulling blocker, like whatever it is. So that would be my answer for Tavai is I'm just curious how they would value the Sam linebacker position if they're doing more even front stuff.
That was awesome.
Yeah. All right. We'll wrap up the mailbag in just a second. But first, a quick word from our friends over at Game Time. We'll be right back. Patriots Daily is powered by Game Time, the best place to get tickets to the NBA playoffs, which is exactly what I did last week to get into Celtics versus Magic at TD Garden. And the Game Time app made that experience that much easier. They make getting tickets faster, easier, even for these hard-to-get playoff seats. But the prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off. So it's the best way to score last-minute deals to get to your favorite team's games. Those last-minute deals can save you up to 60% off when you buy last-minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. The app also has zone deals, which saves you even more when choosing a section and lets Game Time choose the seats for you. They have all-in pricing, a feature that shows you exactly what you're going to have to pay without any surprise fees at checkout. And they also have panoramic seat views right in the app, so you can see exactly what you're going to see when you get to the game. So make sure to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Shout out Game Time. In the ad, I mentioned I went to Celtics Magic last week using the Game Time app. Celtics opening their second round series against the Knicks tonight at TD Garden. A low price right now with the all-in pricing toggle on. It's just $146. Not too bad for, in my opinion, the best team in basketball. So that price will also go down the closer you get to tip-off. So make sure if you want to get in, download Game Time, use that code CLNS. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's I think we're good to wrap up with an interesting question here, which, again, I'm using the question to kind of dovetail into something else. But Corey asked on Twitter, Mike and Taylor, will you guys get us some Efton Chisholm and Land Larison footage this Friday? So behind that question is Patriots open up their rookie minicamp this weekend. Media will be in person on Friday afternoon, so we will be there, and we will try our best to get that footage for you all. But Trevor, I want to ask you about this Patriots undrafted free agency class, because Chisholm and Larison are the big ones that we've talked about. There's obviously a couple more in the fold as well, Taylor. I know that you've been high on a couple other guys, so we can kind of talk about all of it. But is there any chance, or obviously there's a chance, but what are your thoughts on guys like this making the roster and potentially having an actual impact with the Patriots this season?
You guys know the social media meme that's going around where it's like, close enough, like this, like welcome back. This guy is like, all right, close enough, Wes Welker and Danny Woodhead, like welcome back, with these two guys that are there.
Yeah, it's the exciting whites section in the liquor store.
Literally the entire UDFA class. I was just like, I want to spam this thing so bad.
I don't know their whole undrafted free agency haul in front of me, so y'all feel free to shout out after we get talking about these guys. I didn't know anything about Efton Chisholm until I went to the Shrine Bowl. And it took me all of one rep from him to be like, okay, yep, sure, he's getting a shot in the league. Because he is somebody who runs all of his routes as hard as possible, as fast as possible, and with as much precision as possible. Creating separation will always play in the NFL. Now, obviously, the league wants bigger, faster, stronger. It is a big people beat up little people type of a league. So when you are smaller in size, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. But there are a handful of players that have certainly come throughout NFL history. The Patriots know many of them that are smaller in size, yet they just create that separation to where they are a quarterback's best friend, and they're always getting open and they're savvy in what they do. And Chisholm is one of those players who absolutely deserved to. I thought he deserved to get drafted, 6th, 7th round, something like that, but absolutely he deserves a shot to be a practice squad player, potentially somebody that can make the bottom part of a roster. Now, again, the Patriots roster is filled with a lot of names. I'm wondering if he jumps over those names right now. I wonder if they feel as though they could stash him on the practice squad because of the fact that he was an undrafted free agent, but we'll see there. And then Larson he's an incredible receiving back out of the backfield. He's got really good tape, really good size for a player that's coming out of the backfield that has his type of receiving ability. And so, when you look at, man, this receiver room I know it's Henderson, it's Ramondre Stevenson. They have Antonio Gibbs, right? Yep. I totally forgot that they have Antonio Gibson as well. I mean, to me, Land Larison's easily RB4, like right off the bat. And then it's just a matter of like, okay, do you want to keep Antonio Gibson at this point, or would you rather just cut the ties and give it to somebody else? So, two fun players, two players that I knew would be fan favorites no matter where they ended up, honestly.
Yeah, with Chisholm, so I know he always gets the Edelman comms. I just want to say flat out, I don't think he's as explosive out of breaks. I don't think he's as strong. Like, people don't realize why Edelman was so rare. It's because of the explosiveness, and he was rocked up for his size.
Dude, Edelman, even today, Edelman's still jacked.
Yeah. On that pod,
got voted into the Patriots Hall of Fame today.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Big ups to Julian Edelman.
That squirrel. But yeah, no, so he's not Edelman or anything like that, but he blocks his ass off. I think that's going to be a really big difference maker where the effort is going to be very obvious. And I just feel like the consistency is going to make him a favorite of whatever quarterback he ends up playing with. If it's Ben Woolridge, he's going to be the only guy that Woolridge throws to. And I think that's going to put him in a position in the preseason where he's not going to be able to get snuck onto a practice squad, because I feel like he's going to be so productive. That's just how it feels like it goes into New England, the Braxton Berrios, right? I feel like that's exactly what happened there, where it was just the backups loved him and he was too productive a guy to kind of stash. So I think he sneaks on, but only because I think Stefon Diggs starts on PUP. So it's going to have that one role where it's all right, Kendrick Bourne versus Efton Chisholm, Eastern Washington, which guy plays himself onto the roster. And then Land Larison is my Danny Woodhead. It's crazy. It felt too easy, but when you watch it, it's Woodhead was used as a slot receiver by the Jets initially because he was so good as a receiver. And I'm I could see a team that's not very creative doing the same thing with Larison, but he also can run. And he doesn't have, I think, great contact balance, but he's also not the biggest guy. But he has those Woodhead moments where he disappears. and then just shoots out of the gap. And you're like, what the hell happened? He just hides behind blockers. So I love those two guys. Brock Lampy, the fullback. I just feel like they don't have a real fullback on the roster. I think Josh McDaniels loves his fullbacks. It feels like that one is definitely going to happen. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else.
Elijah Ponder's another one that was interesting.
Oh, Ponder's making this team.
Defensive end out of edge
I
rusher
think
out of
him
California.
and Swinson could end up like getting Caleb Chason kicked off the roster. If they use Harold Landry and Anthony Jennings, and those are the early down guys, then I think you take Jennings off and it's Ponder and it's Swinson.
There you go. I look, you guys know the depth of the roster way better than I do, so I'm leaning on y'all for that. If you say that Ponder's making the team, I'll trust you wholeheartedly.
But what do you think of him also? Because like that's what we think in our bubble. But what do you think?
Yeah.
Because I don't see great pass rushers a lot anymore. So when I see him, I'm like, this kid's a freak.
Right.
Yeah, obviously, like this is again another player who I thought would have been drafted, and somebody who I think has the pass rush chops to make a difference. Yeah, I always get wary of there's just. I guess with it being a new coaching staff, you don't have as many entrenched guys on the team. So the players that not only you're drafting, but also bring as undrafted free agents have a good chance to make the roster and be identity players and just be guys that the coaches want to keep on the roster. So making the final 53-man roster and making the active game day roster is tough to do as a rookie in general, but certainly one who's drafted late and is an undrafted free agent. But Ponder at least gives you the pass rush chops where he could be able to, he could do it.
All right. Well, we could probably sit here and talk draft and Patriots with you all day, but unfortunately, the time has come. We want to give you some of your time back here on this lovely Monday afternoon. But before we get you out of here, Trev, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. The insight is always super helpful. Let our viewers and our viewers and our fans know where they can find you and what you got coming down the pipe.
Sure. A lot of my draft work over at PFF.com. If you guys don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one right now for 25% off, actually. And it gives you like all the draft work, all the premium stats, all the fantasy tools, all the betting tools, all the great stuff. Also, if you are super into the draft, I see a lot of people in the comments shouting out NFLSC. Love you guys. We appreciate it. If you want to go hang out with myself and Connor Rogers, we're talking draft 365 all year round. We'll start getting into summer scouting for next year's class coming up here soon in a couple of weeks. I'm already very excited about that. So come hang out with us, the NFL Stock Exchange show that we have on YouTube.
You are one of the foundations of all my draft knowledge that I accumulate. So I have to say it. I want to get you out of here, but I really appreciate what you and Connor do. Thank you so much.
Dude, thank you so much. It means a lot. We hopefully it comes off that we love the draft because we really do. And that we love hanging out with people talking about the draft, which I think is what the show is all about.
No, it is. It's good stuff. So, guys, make sure you go check that out as well. Myself and Taylor will be back later in the week, as we always are here on Patriots Daily. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to Patriots Press Pass for all of your Patriots coverage. And on that note, thank you guys again for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will see you next time. Peace out, everyone.